The gavel struck like thunder. The sound ripped through the courtroom, silencing every whisper, every cough, every breath. Bodies froze in the gallery. Reporters stopped scribbling. Even the air seemed to hold still. My son limped toward the plaintiff's table. Each step was agony. His shoulders bent under invisible weight, the weight of debt, betrayal, 3 years of physical therapy that never quite worked. His cane tapped against the marble floor, the only sound now. He looked small. Defeated. Like a man who'd already lost before the trial even started. Then I stepped in behind him. The judge froze mid-sentence. His mouth hung open, words dying on his tongue. His eyes locked on me, wide and unblinking. Then his knuckles whitened around the edge of the bench, gripping so hard I thought the wood might crack. "Why are you here?" He hissed it. Not loud. Not calm. His voice trembled with fury and disbelief, like I'd crawled out of a grave he'd personally sealed shut. Gasps rippled through the room like a wave crashing against rocks. Reporters leaned forward so fast their chairs squeaked. Cameras clicked. Whispers exploded. My daughter-in-law Vanessa sat at the opposing table, wearing a designer dress that cost more than my son's monthly medical bills. Her smirk, that cold, confident smirk she'd worn since walking through those doors, vanished. Her face went pale. Her lawyer grabbed her wrist, leaning in to whisper something urgent, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at me. For a heartbeat, I was no longer an old woman in a gray coat. I wasn't someone's mother. I wasn't invisible. I was the ghost of a name this courtroom had buried 20 years ago. A name that still haunted its halls. A legend they thought was dead. I said nothing. Silence is power. Let them wonder. Let them panic. I simply set my weathered briefcase on the table. The sound cracked through the courtroom like lightning splitting marble walls. Sharp. Final. Unmistakable. The judge's eyes darted to it. His breathing quickened. His face drained of color. He knew that case. That symbol, that briefcase had been in this courthouse before. In trials that made headlines. In cases that destroyed careers. It was scarred leather, corners worn smooth from decades of battle. It had carried evidence that toppled corrupt officials. Documents that exposed lies. Proof that sent people to prison. He knew me. But he couldn't say it aloud. Not yet. Not here. Not in front of the cameras and reporters and gallery full of strangers. Because saying my name would be admitting what he'd done. What we'd both done. The scandal that ended my career and nearly ended his. The bailiff shifted nervously near the witness stand. Vanessa's lawyer shuffled papers with shaking hands. Someone in the back row coughed, the sound unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. The judge's jaw worked. His throat moved like he was swallowing glass. His gaze stayed locked on that briefcase, then flicked back to my face. Recognition burned in his eyes. So did fear. I met his stare and didn't blink at him. My son turned slightly, glancing back at me with confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand. I hadn't told him I was coming. Hadn't warned him. Because if I had, he would have stopped me. Begged me not to. He didn't know what I knew. What I'd discovered. What I was about to unleash. The clock on the wall ticked forward. Each second stretched like hours. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. His voice came out rough, broken. "Counselor, state your business." I smiled. Cold. Sharp. The smile of someone who'd just declared war. "I'm here to represent my son, Your Honor." The courtroom exploded. 3 years earlier, I swore I'd never walk into a courtroom again. Done. Finished. Buried. I left behind the adrenaline that used to pump through my veins during cross-examination. The victories that made my name famous. The corruption that swallowed my career whole and spit out nothing but shame. My life shrank. But in a good way. A peaceful way. I tended a garden behind the house. Tomatoes, basil, roses that bloomed every spring. I read bedtime stories to my grandson Terence, dragon tales, pirate adventures, anything that made his eyes light up. I kept my son's spirit alive after the construction accident crushed his leg and his dreams. Cooked his favorite meals. Listened when he cried at night. Reminded him he was still a man, still a father, still worthy, small things. Quiet things, but peace never lasts, the debt came first. Medical bills stacked like bricks. Physical therapy twice a week. Medications with names I couldn't pronounce. Insurance covered some. Not enough. Never enough. Then his wife changed. Vanessa used to smile at him like he hung the moon. She'd kiss his forehead when he winced from pain. Held his hand during doctor visits. But after the accident, after the paycheck stopped, after the reality set in that he'd never work construction again, something in her died. Or maybe it was never alive to begin with. She started staying out late. Shopping trips that drained the savings account. Designer handbags that cost more than our monthly mortgage. New friends who drove luxury cars and whispered in her ear about what she deserved. I watched her transform into a stranger. A woman who measured worth in brand names and bank statements. Who looked at my son, her husband, the father of her child, like he was broken furniture she wanted to throw away. When the divorce papers arrived, I thought my son might die, and not physically. Worse. His soul cracked. He sat at the kitchen table holding those papers, hands shaking, tears streaming down his face. She wants half the house, Mom. The house I built. With my own hands. Before the accident. He built it himself. Every beam, every nail. Worked weekends and summers. Poured his heart into those walls because he wanted to give his family something permanent. Something real, and now she wanted to rip it in half. I promised him I'd stand by quietly. Don't worry, I said. The lawyer will handle it. You'll be okay. I lied because I knew what lawyers do. They bill hours. They negotiate. They compromise. They trade pieces of your life like poker chips until everyone loses something and nobody wins, but this wasn't about compromise. This was theft dressed up as heartbreak. I kept my promise for 3 weeks. Stayed quiet. Played the role of the supportive mother who baked casseroles and said comforting things. Then I found the bank statements hidden in Vanessa's drawer. Large deposits. Money from someone named Gavin Rhodes. Dates that matched exactly when she filed for divorce. That's when promises crumbled. Because injustice doesn't knock politely. It kicks down the door. And when it comes for your family, silence becomes betrayal. I opened my closet. Dug past old coats and forgotten boxes. Found the briefcase I'd locked away 2 decades ago. The war was coming, and I was ready. The courthouse letter arrived on a Tuesday. Gold embossed envelope. Heavy paper. The kind that screamed money and powered. I held it in my hands, studying the return address. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside, a familiar signature bled across the page in black ink. Judge Rafael Mendoza. My hands shook. The paper trembled between my fingers like a leaf in a storm. Once my mentor. The man who taught me everything. How to think like a judge. How to anticipate arguments before they happened. How to win cases nobody thought could be won. Once the man who ended my career. The man who took bribes and let me take the fall. Who watched me get disbarred, destroyed, erased from legal history while he climbed higher. Who never called. Never apologized. Never looked back. And now he was the judge assigned to my son's case. Fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. I told no one. Not my son. Not the lawyer. Nobody. Because if I said it out loud, if I admitted that Rafael Mendoza was presiding over this divorce, my son would panic. He'd think we'd already lost. That the system was rigged before we even walked through those doors, he wouldn't be wrong. 18 night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that last case decades ago. The one that destroyed everything. The developer wanted land. The family wouldn't sell. Suddenly the family faced a lawsuit they couldn't afford. Evidence appeared that shouldn't have existed. Witnesses changed their stories overnight, and the verdict came down in the developer's favor, bribed. All of it. I found the paper trail. Confronted Mendoza in his chambers. He looked me in the eye and said, "Walk away or I'll bury you." I didn't walk away. So he buried me. Planted documents in my files. Made it look like I took the money. By the time the ethics board finished their investigation, my name was poison. Disbarred. Blacklisted. Erased. The scandal forced me to vanish. Change my life. Pretend I'd never been anyone. Now he was back. And so was I. The next morning I found my son at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid hospital bills spread across the surface like evidence at a crime scene. His eyes were hollow. Defeated. Then I heard her voice. Vanessa. On the phone in the next room. Door cracked open just enough for sound to leak through. "Gavin, I told you, it's handled," she whispered. "The hearing's in 2 weeks. He won't fight. He's too broken." My blood turned cold. Gavin, the same name from the bank statements. I pressed my ear closer to the door. "Yes, the house," she continued. "Once the judge signs off, the land is yours. My lawyer said Mendoza's cooperative." "No problems." Mendoza's cooperative. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a conspiracy. Secrets multiplied like cracks in plaster, spreading faster than I could track. Each one revealed something darker underneath. Vanessa wasn't just leaving my son. She was selling him out. Trading his home, the house he built with his own hands, to some developer named Gavin in exchange for what? Money? A cut of the profits when they flipped the property, and Mendoza was in on it. The same play. The same corruption. 20 years later and nothing had changed except the victims. This time it was my family in the crosshairs. Something deeper hid beneath this divorce, and I could smell it. That familiar scent of setup, of exploitation, of law twisted for greed. The same stench that destroyed my career was now poisoning my son's life. I stepped back from the door. My heart pounded. My mind raced. I needed proof. Real evidence. Not just overheard phone calls and suspicious bank deposits. I needed something solid enough to destroy them all. I grabbed my coat and keys. There was someone I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. Someone who owed me a favor from the old days. Someone who specialized in finding things people desperately wanted to stay hidden. I drove across town to a small office above a pawn shop, knocked 3 times. The door opened. A woman with silver hair and sharp eyes looked me up and down. "I wondered when you'd show up," Elena Cruz said. I stepped inside. "I need everything," I told her. "And I need it fast," she smiled. "Let's burn them down." I followed my instincts. 3 nights later, I sat in my car outside a downtown restaurant. Engine off. Lights off. Just me in the darkness and the sick feeling in my gut that told me I was right. Then I saw her. Vanessa stepped out of a black sedan, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my son's last 3 mortgage payments combined. Heels clicking against the pavement. Hair perfect. Smile bright. She wasn't dressed for a casual dinner, she was dressed for business. A man met her at the entrance. Tall. Expensive suit. Confident handshake that lasted too long. He placed his hand on her lower back as they walked inside. Gavin Rhodes. I'd looked him up after that phone call. Real estate magnate. Known for flipping foreclosed homes and buying distressed properties for pennies, then selling them for millions. His company's website showed a portfolio of demolished family homes turned into luxury condos. He was a vulture in a designer suit. I grabbed my phone. aimed the camera through the restaurant window. They slid into a corner booth. Private. Secluded. The kind of spot where people make deals they don't want seen. Their laughter floated through the glass. Light. Easy. Like old friends catching up. But friends don't do what happened next. Gavin lifted a briefcase onto the table. Black leather. Combination lock. He opened it, angled so I couldn't see inside, but Vanessa leaned forward, eyes wide. She nodded. Smiled. Reached across and touched his hand. Then he closed the briefcase and slid it across the table to her. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Click. 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 I photographed everything. Every angle. Every moment. The briefcase. The touch. The smile that said this wasn't the first time. 40 minutes later they left together. Same black sedan. He drove. She sat in the passenger seat, the briefcase on her lap like a prize. I followed them. 3 cars back. Careful. Invisible, they pulled into a parking garage downtown. I waited at street level, watching the entrance. 20 minutes passed. She came out alone. No briefcase. But her phone was pressed to her ear and she was smiling. I drove home shaking. The next morning I called Elena. I need to know everything about Gavin Rhodes. His company. His properties. His business dealings. Everything. Give me 48 hours, she said. It took 36. Elena showed up at my door with a folder thick enough to kill someone. She dropped it on my kitchen table. You were right, she said. This isn't a divorce. It's a heist. I opened the folder. The first page showed a map. Red circles marked properties across the city. Foreclosed homes. Bankruptcies. Families destroyed, every single one now owned by Gavin Rhodes Development LLC. The second page showed my son's address circled in red, labeled Acquisition Target Priority 1. My hands trembled. He's been planning this for months, Elena said. That land your son's house sits on? It's worth millions. Prime location. Zoned for commercial development. Gavin's been buying up the surrounding properties quietly. Your son's house is the last piece. The only thing standing between him and a $50 million construction project. The divorce wasn't about love. It was corporate theft disguised as heartbreak. Vanessa wasn't leaving my son because he was broken. She was leaving him because Gavin paid her to. Paid her to file for divorce, demand the house, force a sale, then Gavin would swoop in, buy it for nothing, demolish it, and build his empire on top of my son's dreams. I wanted to scream. To drive to Vanessa's apartment and confront her. To shove these papers in her face and watch her crumble. But rage without proof is suicide, and I didn't just have proof. I had a nuclear bomb. There's more, Elena said quietly. She slid another page across the table. Bank records. Wire transfers. Dates and amounts. Gavin had been paying Vanessa for 6 months. Small deposits at first. Then larger. 50,000 here. 75,000 there. The final transfer happened 2 days before she filed for divorce. $200,000, blood money. And this, Elena said, pulling out one last document. A text message thread. Recovered from Vanessa's cloud backup. Gavin, Mendoza's on board. He'll rule in your favor. Just play the victim. Vanessa, what about her? The mother, Gavin, she's nobody. Disbarred decades ago. Powerless. Don't worry about her. I stared at those words until they burned into my brain. Nobody, powerless. I closed the folder. Looked at Elena. Find me everything on Mendoza too, I said. Every case he's ever ruled on. Every connection to Gavin. Every dirty secret he's buried. Elena smiled. Already started. I stood up. Walked to my closet. Pulled out the briefcase I'd hidden away for 20 years. The war wasn't coming anymore, IT was here. And they just made their first mistake, they forgot who I used to be. Elena moved fast. Within a week she slid a folder across my kitchen table. Thicker than before. Heavier. The kind of weight that crushes lives. Read it alone, she said. You'll need time to process. She left without another word. I opened the folder. Photos. Bank transfers. Secret deeds. Legal documents with forged signatures. Email chains that spelled out the conspiracy in black and white. Each page sliced a new wound. Gavin had wired large sums to Vanessa's account right before she filed for divorce. Not just the $200,000 I'd already seen. More. Small payments disguised as consulting fees and contractor deposits. $50,000 here. $30,000 there. Payments that dated back almost a year. She'd been planning this longer than I thought. The next section showed meeting logs. Calendar entries pulled from Judge Mendoza's clerk's personal laptop. Elena didn't tell me how she got them. I didn't ask. Gavin Rhodes. Meeting with clerk. 3 p.m., conference room B. 2 days before the divorce filing. Another meeting. Another date. Another exchange of information that should never have happened. The corruption pattern was too familiar. I'd seen this before. 20 years ago. Different names. Same playbook. Developer wants land. Family refuses. Suddenly lawsuits appear. Judges rule in favor of money. Families lose everything. IT mirrored the case that destroyed me decades earlier. The one that got me disbarred. The one where Mendoza blamed me for crimes he committed, history repeating itself. Only this time my family was the target. I wanted to scream. To flip the table. To drive to Mendoza's house and burn it down with everything inside. Instead, I built a strategy. I pulled out a legal pad. Started writing. Evidence lists. Witness names. Timeline of events. Every piece of the puzzle laid out like a battle plan. Because rage without strategy is just noise. And I needed precision. Surgical strikes. Calculated moves that would dismantle them piece by piece until nothing remained but truth. I'd stay silent. Let them think the crippled man and his aging mother were defenseless. Let them believe we'd roll over. Accept the loss. Walk away broken, let arrogance blind them. Gavin thought I was nobody. Powerless. Vanessa thought I was just an old woman who baked cookies and stayed out of the way. Mendoza thought I was still the disgraced lawyer he'd destroyed. Too scared to fight back. Too broken to matter. They were all wronged. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Memorizing every document. Every date. Every transaction. I studied Mendoza's case history, looking for patterns. Found 12 cases in the last 5 years where developers won against families. 12 families destroyed. 12 fortunes made. And Gavin Rhodes was connected to 7 of them. I contacted old colleagues. Lawyers who remembered me from before the scandal. Some hung up. Others listened. A few agreed to help quietly. Off the record, I filed the paperwork for my bar reinstatement. Used connections I thought were dead. Called in favors from people who still believed in me. The process usually took months. Elena made it happen in 3 weeks. When the approval letter arrived, I didn't celebrate. I just added it to my briefcase. One more weapon. My son noticed the change. He'd catch me working late at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. "Mom, what are you doing?" he'd ask. "Research," I'd say. "For the lawyer." "Just helping out." He believed me because he wanted to. Because hope is easier than truth. Vanessa stopped by twice to pick up Terrence. Both times she looked at me with that same smug smile. Like she'd already won. Like my son was already evicted. Like the house was already demolished. I smiled back. Sweet. Harmless, let her think I was defeated. The week before the hearing, Elena delivered the final piece. A recording. Audio from a lunch meeting between Gavin and Mendoza. Hidden microphone, crystal cleared. I listened to it 3 times. Gavin's voice, the Rhodes property acquisition. You'll rule in favor of the wife? Mendoza's voice, it's handled. The husband has no representation worth worrying about. Gavin's voice, and the mother, Mendoza's laugh, ancient history. She's not a threat. Trust me. I saved the recording to 4 different devices, uploaded backup copies to secure servers. Made physical copies on CDs, because this recording was the kill shot. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my room, briefcase open, reviewing everything one last time. Photos. Bank records. Meeting logs. The recording, everything I needed to destroy them. My son knocked softly. Mom? You okay? I'm fine, I said. He limped into the room, sat on the edge of my bed. I'm scared, he whispered. What if we lose? What if she takes everything? I touched his face. We won't lose. How do you know? I didn't answer. Because the truth would terrify him. When the trial opened tomorrow, I wouldn't be the quiet mother sitting in the gallery. I'd be the queen of law they buried 20 years ago, and queens don't lose, they conquer. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Footsteps. Doors closing. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Then I heard voices. Through the thin wall separating my room from the guest bedroom where Vanessa was staying for the night. She'd insisted on being there for Terrence's sake. To put him to bed one last time before the hearing, I should have known better. My granddaughter's voice came first. Small. Trembling. The sound of a child carrying weight no child should carry. Mama, I don't want to lie. I sat up. Heart pounding. Daddy still loves me, Terrence continued. He reads me stories. He helps with my homework. Why do I have to say he doesn't? Silence. Then Vanessa's voice. Cold. Rehearsed. Like she'd practiced this speech. If you don't, we lose everything. My blood turned to ice. But Mama, listen to me. Vanessa's voice sharpened. When the judge asks you questions tomorrow, you tell him exactly what we practiced. You say Daddy's too sad to take care of you. You say he forgets to make dinner. You say you're scared when he cries at night. Do you understand? But that's not true. It doesn't matter what's true. Vanessa snapped. What matters is winning. The judge needs to believe your father can't take care of you. That's how we get the house. That's how we get everything we deserve. I don't want the house. I want Daddy. A pause. Then Vanessa's voice dropped lower. Colder. You're 8 years old. You don't know what you want. Now stop crying and go to sleep. Tomorrow you do exactly what I told you. No mistakes. I pressed my palm against the wall, fighting tears. She was training a child to perjure herself, coaching an 8-year-old to lie under oath. To destroy her own father with false testimony. To help steal the only home she'd ever known. That was the moment I knew silence was betrayal. I couldn't sit back anymore. Couldn't watch from the gallery. Couldn't trust some overworked lawyer to protect my family. This wasn't just about property or money anymore. This was about a child's soul. I stood up. Walked to my closet. Opened the safe hidden behind my winter coats. Inside sat the leather briefcase I'd locked away 20 years ago. I lifted it out. Set it on my bed. The lock clicked open under my fingers, the combination still muscle memory after all these years. Inside lay my bar certificate. Edges yellowed. Seal intact. My fountain pen. The one I'd used to sign closing arguments that changed lives, and the oath. Framed. Glass cracked from the day I'd thrown it against the wall after my disbarment. I solemnly swear to uphold justice, defend the innocent, and serve the truth that I'd broken that oath once. Let corruption silence me. Let fear win. Not again, I dusted them off. One by one. Certificate. Pen. Oath. Then I pulled out the documents Elena had given me. The evidence. The smoking gun. Everything I needed to destroy them. I packed it all carefully. Like loading ammunition, tomorrow the judge would see why I was there, not as a bystander. Not as a victim. As a lawyer. I checked my watch. 2 a.m. 4 hours until sunrise. I didn't sleep. Instead, I rehearsed. Practiced my opening statement. Memorized every piece of evidence. Every date. Every transaction. Every lie. When dawn finally broke through my window, I was ready. I put on my gray suit. The one I'd worn during my last trial 2 decades ago. It still fit. A little loose now, but it fit. I looked at myself in the mirror. Older. Gray hair. Lines around my eyes. But my gaze was steady. The Queen of Law stared back at me. Downstairs, I heard Vanessa moving around. Making breakfast. Acting like a concerned mother. Playing her role perfectly. I heard Terrence's small voice. Mama, my stomach hurts. You're fine, Vanessa said. Eat your cereal. I don't want to go to court. You don't have a choice. I gripped the briefcase handle until my knuckles turned white. My son appeared in my doorway, already dressed. He looked exhausted. Defeated. Ready? He asked quietly. I nodded. More than you know. He didn't understand. Not yet. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Vanessa took her own car with Terrence. Probably coaching him one last time. When we pulled into the parking lot, I saw Gavin Rhodes leaning against his black sedan. Smug smile. Expensive watch catching the sunlight. He didn't even glance at us. We were beneath his notice. Invisible. I smiled. Perfect. Let them all think I'm nobody. Let them all believe they've already won, because the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming. We walked through the courthouse doors. Security. Metal detectors. Marble floors that echoed with every step, then into the courtroom. My son limped to the plaintiff's table. And I stepped in behind him. The gavel struck. The judge looked up. And everything changed. Dawn arrived gray and heavy, the kind of morning that feels like the sky's holding its breath. Waiting for something terrible or beautiful to happen, I found my son sitting by the window, still in his pajamas. Pale. Defeated. Staring at nothing. He didn't hear me walk in. Malik, I said softly. He flinched. Turned. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. Mom, promise you won't make a scene, he whispered. Please. I can't handle any more drama. Just let the lawyer do his job. Let it be over. I crossed the room. Sat beside him. Took his hand in mine. His hand felt so small now. But I remembered when it was tiny. When he was 5 years old, gripping my finger, believing I could fix anything. Broken toys. Scraped knees. Bad dreams. He used to think I was invincible, then life taught him I wasn't. I won't make a scene, I said. He exhaled. Relief flooding his face. I'll make a statement. His brow furrowed. What does that mean? I squeezed his hand. It means today you'll remember who your mother is. He didn't understand. But he would. I left him there and went back to my room. Closed the door. Locked it. Alone in the silence, I opened Elena's folder again. The evidence was airtight. Photos. Bank records. Recordings. Testimony from witnesses who'd worked with Gavin before. Everything I needed to destroy them. But fear clawed at me anyway. What if I'd grown too old to fight? 20 years since I'd stood in a courtroom. 20 years since I'd cross-examined a witness or delivered closing arguments. What if my mind wasn't sharp anymore? What if I stuttered? Forgot key details? Made mistakes that cost us everything? What if Mendoza crushed us again? He'd done it before. Easily. Made me look like a criminal while he walked away clean. What if he had tricks I didn't remember? Connections I couldn't match. My hands shook as I closed the folder. I walked to the bathroom. Stared at my reflection in the mirror. Lines deeper than I remembered. Gray hair. 63 years carved into my face, but my eyes were steadier than they'd been in decades. No, I told the mirror. I've been silent long enough. The woman staring back at me wasn't weak. Wasn't broken. Wasn't defeated. She was a lawyer who'd won cases nobody thought could be won. A mother who'd sacrificed everything for her family. A fighter who'd been knocked down but never stayed down. You remember how to do this, I whispered to my reflection. You've always known. I thought about Terrence. 8 years old. Being coached to lie. To destroy her father. To carry guilt she'd never shake. I thought about Malik. My son. Who'd built a house with his own hands and was watching it get stolen by people who thought he was too broken to matter. I thought about Mendoza. Who'd escaped justice once. Who thought he could do it again. And I thought about myself. The lawyer I used to be. The woman who'd let fear silence her. Not anymore. Outside, church bells tolled 0.9 times, deep. Heavy. Echoing across the neighborhood, I counted each one. Let the sound fill me. Ground me. When the 9th bell faded, I took it as permission to fight. To speak. To bring down fire on everyone who thought they could destroy my family. I opened my briefcase. Checked everything one last time. Evidence organized. Notes prepared. Strategy memorized. Then I put on my gray suit jacket. Straightened my collar. Picked up my briefcase. Walked downstairs. Malik was dressed now. Sitting at the kitchen table. Holding a cold cup of coffee he hadn't touched. Ready? I asked it. He nodded weakly. Mom, he said as I headed for the door. Yeah, thank you. For being here. I turned back. Looked at my son. My beautiful, broken, brave son who'd survived so much already. Always, I said. We drove to the courthouse in my old sedan. Radio off. Windows up. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and my son's shallow breathing. He was terrified. I wasn't. Not anymore. Fear had controlled me for 20 years. Fear of Mendoza. Fear of failure. Fear of being destroyed again. But fear is a choice. And today I chose rage instead. We pulled into the courthouse parking lot. I turned off the engine. Sat there for a moment. Hands on the steering wheel. Heart steady. Mom? Malik's voice was small. What if we lose? I looked at him. Really looked at him. We won't, I said, but what if we won't? Because losing wasn't an option anymore, not when my grandson's future was on the line, not when justice had been delayed for 2 decades, not when truth was sitting in my briefcase, waiting to explode. I grabbed my briefcase. Opened the car door. The church bells tolled again in the distance. 10 o'clock. Time to fight. We walked through the courthouse doors together. Side by side. Father and son. Mother and warrior. And when we stepped into that courtroom, everything changed. When the verdict came, silence held its breath. The courtroom had been in recess for 47 minutes. 47 minutes of waiting. Whispering. Reporters making frantic phone calls. Gavin's lawyer arriving in a panic. Vanessa sitting stone-faced, mascara already starting to run. Then the bailiff called us back. Everyone stood as Judge Mendoza entered. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in less than an hour. His robe hung crooked. His hands shook as he sat down. He didn't look at me. Couldn't. Please be seated, he said quietly. The room obeyed. Every chair creaked. Every breath audible. Mendoza shuffled papers. Cleared his throat 3 times. Stared at the documents in front of him like they were written in a foreign language. Finally, he spoke. His voice trembled as he read, in the matter of Holloway versus Holloway, this court finds the following. He paused. Swallowed hard. Based on evidence presented this morning, including financial records, recorded conversations, and testimony regarding conspiracy to commit fraud, this court rules as follows. Another pause. I didn't breathe. The marital property located at 1247 Oak Ridge Drive belongs solely to the respondent, Malik Holloway. The petitioner's claim is dismissed with prejudice. My son's hand found mine under the table. Squeezed so hard it hurt, Mendoza continued, voice cracking. Furthermore, primary custody of the minor child, Terrence Holloway, is hereby awarded to the father, Malik Holloway. The petitioner is granted supervised visitation pending further psychological evaluation. Vanessa gasped. A sound like something breaking. Additionally, Mendoza said, and now his voice was barely a whisper, this court is referring all evidence of bribery, conspiracy, and judicial misconduct to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. He looked up then. Straight at me, his eyes were empty. This hearing is concluded. The gavel came down, final, absolute. My daughter-in-law collapsed into her chair. Her whole body folded. Mascara bleeding down her face in black rivers. Her lawyer tried to say something but she waved him away, sobbing into her hands. Gavin didn't wait. He stood up in the gallery and slipped out a side door before anyone could stop him. His lawyer followed, already on the phone, probably calling damage control, but there was no controlling this damage. Reporters swarmed immediately. Cameras flashing. Microphones thrust forward. Questions shouting over each other. Ma'am, what's your name? How long were you disbarred? Did you know about the corruption before today? What's your relationship to Judge Mendoza? I ignored them all, gathered my briefcase. The same scarred leather case that had once carried both my downfall and my redemption. I closed it slowly. Deliberately. Let them wait. My son stood beside me. Tears streaking his cheeks. He couldn't speak. Just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then he gripped my arm. Mom, he whispered. You did it. I looked at him. This man I'd raised. This father. This fighter who'd survived an accident that should have killed him and a marriage that tried to finish the job. I shook my head. We did, I said. Truth did, because it wasn't me who won today. It was justice, justice that had been buried for 20 years. Silenced. Forgotten. Left to rot in the dark. But justice doesn't die. It waits, and today it finally woke up. For the first time in years, I felt lighter than air. The weight I'd been carrying, the shame, the guilt, the fear, lifted. Gone. Like someone had cut the chains, Malik hugged me. Right there in the courtroom. In front of everyone. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed. Thank you, he kept saying. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I held him. Let him cry. Let him release everything he'd been holding in. Behind us, security escorted Vanessa out. She didn't look at us. Didn't say a word. Just walked out with her head down, destroyed. Mendoza had already disappeared into his chambers. Probably lawyering up. Probably making calls. Probably realizing his entire career was about to burn. Good, the reporters finally backed off when courthouse security stepped in. They'd get their story. Just not from me. We walked out of the courtroom together. Father and son. Mother and warrior. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight breaking through clouds. The kind of light that feels like a blessing. Terrence was waiting in the hallway with a court advocate. When he saw Malik, he ran. Daddy, Malik dropped his cane. Caught his son. held him like he'd never let go. I'm sorry, Terrence sobbed. Mama told me to lie, but I didn't want to. I didn't, Shoo, Malik whispered. It's okay. It's over. You're coming home to. I watched them. Grandfather and father and son. 3 generations. Survivors.my phone buzzed. Text from Elena. You're all over the news. Nicely done, Queen. I smiled, typed back, justice never retires. She sent back a crown emoji. We drove home in silence. But it was different now. Not the heavy silence of defeat, the peaceful silence of victory. When we pulled into the driveway of the house that was still ours, Malik turned to me. What happens now? I looked at the house. The one he built with his hands, now? I said. We live. That evening I walked home beneath the same church bells that had tolled before dawn. Their echo no longer sounded like warning. Now it sounded like benediction, like forgiveness. Like vindication. Like the universe finally exhaling after holding its breath for 20 years. The sun was setting. Gold and orange bleeding across the sky. The kind of sunset that feels like a promise. Inside the house, everything had changed. My granddaughter slept upstairs, safe. No more coaching. No more lies. No more fear that someone would force her to choose between her parents. Just peace. Downstairs, my son moved through the kitchen. Still walking with crutches, but different now. His shoulders weren't bent anymore. His eyes weren't hollowed. He hummed while setting the dinner table, actually hummed out a song I hadn't heard in years. Something his father used to sing. Back when life was simple. Before accidents. Before betrayal. Before everything broke, but we weren't broken anymore. I stood in the doorway watching him. This man who'd survived so much. Who'd built a house with his bare hands. Who'd refused to give up even when the world told him he was finished. He was setting 3 plates. Terrence still asleep? He asked without looking up. Yeah. Court exhausted him, Malik nodded. Let him rest. He deserves it. We both did. I walked to my room. Picked up the leather briefcase sitting on my bed. Ran my fingers over the scarred surface. Every mark told a story. Every scratch was a battle. I carried it to the corner of the living room. Placed it down gently, scarred. Victorious. Silent. It didn't need to speak anymore. The evidence was delivered. The war was won. The case was closed. I walked to the window. Looked out at the fading sky. Colors deepening. Night approaching. And I whispered the words that had been burning in my chest all day. When I walked into the courtroom, the judge was furious. Why are you here? I paused. Smiled. Because justice never retires. Behind me, Malik laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from deep in your chest. The kind born from survival. Mom, you talking to yourself again? Just reflecting, I said. On what? I turned to face him. On the fact that we won. He set down the last fork. Looked at me. Really looked at me. We didn't just win, Mom. You destroyed them. They destroyed themselves, I corrected. I just held up the mirror. Terrence appeared at the top of the stairs. Rubbing his eyes. Wearing pajamas covered in cartoon dragons. Grandma? Is Mama coming back? The question hung in the air. Malik's smile faded. I walked to the stairs. Knelt down so I was eye level with my grandson. Your mama made some bad choices, I said gently. But you'll still see her. When she's ready. When things are better. Will things get better? I touched his face. They already are. He nodded. Seemed to accept that. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Malik laughed again. Yeah, buddy. Spaghetti it is. We ate together. The three of us. Around the table in the house that was still ours. The house that Malik built. That Vanessa tried to steal. That Gavin wanted to demolish, but it was still standing, and so were we. After dinner, I helped Terence with his bath. Read him a story about knights and dragons. Watched him fall asleep holding his stuffed bear. Safe, that word kept echoing in my mind. Safe, downstairs, Malik was washing dishes. Moving slower now. Pain creeping back in. But still moving. Need help? I asked. I got it. I sat at the kitchen table. Watched him work. Mom? Yeah, what happens to Mendoza? Prison, probably. The Attorney General doesn't mess around with judicial corruption. Good. Silence. Then, what about you? You going back to law? I thought about that. The courtroom. The adrenaline. The fight. No, I said finally. That was a one-time thing. I'm retired. You sure? You are incredible today. I smiled. I'm sure. Tomorrow I'm tending my garden again. Because that's what I wanted. Small things. Quiet things. Tomatoes and roses and bedtime stories. But tonight, I allowed myself one truth. Sometimes you have to step back into the fire to prove the flame was yours all along. I'd spent 20 years running from my past. From the scandal. From the shame. From the lawyer I used to be. But today I walked straight into that fire, and I didn't burn, the fire did. Malik finished the dishes. Dried his hands. Limped over and kissed my forehead. Good night, Mom. And thank you. For everything. Always, I said. He headed upstairs. I sat alone in the kitchen. The house quiet around me. The hum of the refrigerator. The tick of the clock. The creak of old wood settling. Home outside, the church bells tolled one last time. 11 o'clock. I closed my eyes. Let the sound wash over me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Reporters. Questions. Maybe more legal battles as Mendoza's case unfolded, but tonight? Tonight we were safe. Tonight we had one. Tonight justice remembered who it belonged to. I stood up. Turned off the lights. Headed upstairs. And for the first time in 20 years, I slept without nightmares. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. And if you want to hear what happened during Mendoza's trial, trust me, you don't want to miss that part. Let me know in the comments. Part 2 is coming soon. Stay tuned.